Yeah, there you are. There you are.
Right. Okay, so let's start letting people in. Here we go. Welcome, everyone. Good to see you today. Welcome,
hey,
Pravanya.
Wow.
Appreciate you showing up.
Wow.
David
From
Skolnick.
Way up high in the mountains.
L.D. Stewart.
Yeah.
Very nice turnout here. Mark Hennon from New York. Great to see you here. Wow. I want to know what's going on with your apartment there in New York, the saga of that amazing loft apartment that you had, and if you still get to live there. Or tell me in the chat what's going on with that. Quick story about Mark Hennon. I don't know how anybody knows Mark Hennon, but he's out there in New York City. I think it's Tribeca or something. Back in, I don't know, probably the 80s or 90s, he scored an amazing loft apartment in what was an industrial building. It's huge. And, you know, he could work on pianos there, do all this cool stuff. It was super inexpensive. I think it was rent controlled in some way. And basically he had stuck it out there for so many years until he's pretty much the last, you know, rent controlled in this building where they really wanted him out of there so that they could actually start charging again. And, but he really got a lot of it. It's a very beautiful loft apartment that he created there, and also kind of a rebuilding studio. Okay, so let's talk about our guest today here. We'll give a little introduction to the show for those of you newbies who need to know what we're doing here. So this is Piano Tech Radio Hour, and what we do is we bring you the most interesting and knowledgeable folks from the piano industry to have some cool chats with them. This event is brought to you by Piano Technicians Masterclasses, which is an online educational resource that offers you cutting-edge instruction from piano industry masters without leaving your home. You can find out more at pianotechniciansmasterclass.com. The new news is that we're having a convention again in March on the 18th to the 20th. And we had a great convention experience back in December. It was the very first ever online piano tech convention. Really happy with how it went. So we decided to do another one. And our guest today will be present, and we're very excited about that. He's a revered instructor. And I will give a little bit more about him, and then we'll get started. And by the way, if you do want to attend that convention, I don't know if you noticed, for those of you that didn't, you've got like a day or something to catch it. I put a coupon code in a recent email where you can get 50% off the final cost of the convention. Not the current cost, but the final cost, which is less than what the listed prices are right now. So if you want to seek out that coupon code, or I'll just tell it to you right now. It's all caps, enjoy 50, the number 50 and the word enjoy, no spaces. And yeah, so if you're excited to get the best price you can, go ahead and use that in the next couple of days. About Fred Sturm, who is our guest today. His training has included the full 4 weeks of the CF Theodore Steinway Academy, 1 week of training with Shigeru Kawai, 2 weeks at the Souder Factory in Spikingen, Germany, 10 or more national PTG conventions, and various other opportunities. As a pianist, Fred has specialized in the music of Latin America and of Brazilian composer Heitor Villa-Lobos. In particular, we talked about the pronunciation before. I hope I got that right. For over 25 years, he's been doing this type of music. And Fred performs regularly now and has recorded and released 5 CDs with another in process. So Fred, wow, really great to have you here. Impressive background, and welcome to Piano Tech Radio Hour.
Glad to be here. Hello to everybody in these days of what shall we say, socially distanced communication. Very happy to be here. One of the things that we had talked about is the connection between being careers of being a pianist and a piano technician. And I'd like to just say a few words about that as an opening. You know,
hey, Fred, before you start, let me say to everybody else that's here, very grateful to have you. I believe I suggested you as a guest. I've been here for about 15 years. I've been in classes. I've heard at least 2 CDs. We have a massive opportunity today to ask questions of a human being that's a high-end concert and recording quality piano technician and a high-end world-class pianist at the same time. Very rare. Very rare. So I have burning questions for him about aftertouch and about how that's used in his playing protocol. So I'm sure that there's other of you nerds that have questions that come up about the interface, as he just was going to hove into, of technician and pianist. So this is just focus, ask great questions, and pay attention, kids. Mr. Stern.
Indeed.
Yeah, one of the interesting aspects of the 2 careers, as it were, is that really in both cases, being a piano technician and trying to be as good a piano technician as you can, and being a musician, being a pianist, both are endlessly impossible careers to encompass entirely. And both require tremendous drive, inner development, provide the opportunity to use areas of your brain and your body that are not used by the typical person. They both require a certain amount of obsessive compulsive, I won't call it disorder, I'll just call it focus. Because yeah, you don't really want to have the disorder. You want to be using the obsession and the compulsion toward an end. And of course, in the final analysis, the pianist and the piano technician are a team that makes possible the magic of bringing the ideas, the imaginations of composers to life. You know, I became a piano technician as a day job. What I really wanted to do was play the piano, but I couldn't see a way to play the piano and make a living at it that I would want to do. So that's, you know, that's how I got into the game. Once I became a technician at a university, I had the opportunity to experiment with all kinds of things, learn, well, to take all of the things that I could read about in books, in the journal, that learn about in classes at conventions and so forth, and put them into practice without having to sell the job. I could simply learn how to, well, come up with my own way of putting those things into practice and observe those instruments over a long period of time and play on the instruments.
Wow. So it was kind of like your own personal long-term competency playground.
Oh, absolutely. And the one career informed the other. That is, as I was able to prep the pianos in increasing levels of refinement, I was able to develop my technique in ways that I had never been able to before, because I had never had well-prepped pianos available to me to practice on, and rarely to perform on.
Huge statement.
That
Huge statement to make.
Hmm?
That's a huge statement to make, that in your life previously, you had had very few or almost no really well prepped pianos as a player, as a player.
And I think that's common. It's common, especially outside of the major metropolitan areas. The thing is that and this is one of the things that has really motivated me to continually improve my craft and to develop protocols for piano preparation and try to diffuse them one way or another, writing articles, giving classes, whatever, writing on the COT list, and so forth, is because we have a responsibility, and it's a heavy responsibility. Pianists depend on us absolutely, and they don't know what to ask for. So if we don't know how to give pianists what they need, they're never going to have it, and they're going to be handicapped. Just mention one little anecdote. Probably about 20 years ago, my former piano teacher as an undergrad was retiring, and someone gave her some money to do with as she wished for a retirement party, and she decided to have a concert and invite some of her former students, and I was one of them. So I went and I spent some time with her in her house, and she's asking me, what are you working on these days? And I want to go over to the piano and show her. And oh my God, I simply could, it brought me back to the days when I was studying with her. This piano, you can't do these things on. The effects that I have sweated blood over, it can't happen. And you can only create these effects when you have an instrument that is where everything is prepped, where you have it has to be at least some kind of consistent level. We don't absolutely have to have all let off at 1 millimeter, but you have to have it at least within 2 millimeters, and so forth. Down the line. So the going to all of these, going to the New York things and so forth, the Speichingen, Germany was the real eye-opener for me, because those guys in that factory, it's interesting. I went there, the Klavierbaumeister asks me, what do you want to learn while you're here? And I said, I want to learn how to prep grand pianos. And he said, well, the one guy who I would have train you is off on sick leave and won't be back. And that leaves it on me, and I have a lot of stuff to do. Well, we'll do what we can, because what they do is they make 1,000 uprights a year and 100 grands a year, opposite of Steinway, right? So we did that, but while I was there, I worked on grands for a week, and while I was there, I seen what those upright guys were doing. It's just completely eye-opening to you. You play on those upright pianos, and they're wonderful. What is wonderful about them? And the answer is the care to detail that goes into their preparation. It's not something magic in the soundboard wood. I'm not saying, the soundboard wood is important, the ribbing is important, the scaling is important, the hammers are important, but it's really the detailed work that they do on every single instrument.
That's
Every
right.
single upright piano there, every hammer is voiced more than the entire, all of the hammers in any upright made in America ever. Well, not ever. They used to voice back in the 20s. I don't think anyone voiced an upright hammer in any factory in America. Well, there may be an exception or two in the 50s through the end of the 20th century. They just didn't do it, let alone travel, let alone all of these other things. So
Yeah,
I take
it's
those techniques and I go back to the university and I go and work on my 50-year-old Hamilton studios. And I find that, hey, wow, these could be quite acceptable instruments. You can make music on them, where I previously had thought that they're trash, right?
and you thought they were trash because they were so deeply out of regulation and needed to be rebushed and just.
Well, yeah, until you have, let's just talk about travel. Hammers going this way and that way, and oh my God. And I never would have gone to the trouble, because it's so much trouble on a piano like that to pull the whole thing, to get the spring out of the way, all of that work, put it back in. It never would have occurred to me to do a fine travel job, because it's so time consuming. Well, you learn how, you train yourself, you figure out how to do it as efficiently as you can, and you do it. And then you square the hammers, cast the hammers, however you want it. I like to call it squaring it, because what we're really doing is we're balancing the hammer on the shank so that it is, so that the center of it is in the arc that goes directly to the string. And you file them and you needle all of the shoulder, do deep needling on all of the shoulders, and you do a nice even regulation, and that's a piano.
Piano starts to sing. So there's two things that I want to say to kind of like support everything you're saying. One is what I say at the beginning of pretty much every class I've ever taught. Pianos are insanely technician dependent. They just,
Yep.
that's just the state of being of an acoustic piano. Number one. Number two, the percentage of people that have the passion and the commitment to go all the way to like achieving, or certainly on the road to achieving mastery with their body and their ears and their sensibilities to learn how to make a piano sing. That's what Fred was learning from his mentors. And then you can't just learn from your mentors. You got to go do it then. The second phrase is you got to like being in the trenches. And the trenches are traveling nasty old upright hammers. The trenches are doing 88 things, 7, 8, 9, 10 times. That's what it takes to make a piano sing and sustain and bloom on the other end. And that's why Fred.
One of the real problems that we all face as piano technicians is having the opportunity. Because if all you are doing is home service and you're taking appointments and doing 4 piano tunings a day, 5 days a week or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and then you see a piano that needs something, now you're going to have to sell the job. You're going to have to know how many hours it's going to take to be able to come up with some kind of a budget. You have to be secure that the result will be worth the money that you're trying to sell. Now, how did you get those chops to be able to do that? And the only way you get those chops is by doing it, which is why the university job was absolutely the most wonderful thing I ever did, also at the same time as being the stupidest thing I ever did, because, you know, I could have made 10 times as much money over the last 20 years.
Yeah.
But being at a university, I had the opportunity to just make that decision. It needs hammers. I'll order some hammers. I've got a budget. Put them on. Try this kind of hammer. Try that kind of hammer. Needs voicing. Well, how do you voice? Experiment with this method, that method, the other method. I finally just find out what works. And by the way, what works, and the only thing that really works, is deep shoulder needling. Very deep, not 5 millimeter, 10 millimeter.
11, 12 millimeters sometimes.
Exactly.
All the way down in.
10 millimeter minimum.
Yeah.
You know, when I first saw voicing tools like that, I said, no way. Now, hang on a second. I've got someone I need to.
Yeah.
All right. I'll take a.
Sorry, I'm here. I'm back.
That was hilarious, dude.
Teaches piano lessons, and she has a parent who was Chinese and speaks only Chinese, and he came to this store. So where was I?
Life as we know it. Awesome.
We have to continue living our lives. Lost my thread. Can you remind me?
Well, I'll bring a question in from the chat, actually, real
That's
quick
fine.
here, or a comment, and see what it says. And we can return to this if we want to. Diane said, after finishing one grad, the owner sat down and played. Suddenly she stopped, sighed in relief, and asked me, do you know what it is like to concertize? It's like riding in a rodeo. You have to ride whatever bucking bronco they send you out on.
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
absolutely true.
Absolutely. And it is.
I use a different metaphor. I say you're a gigolo for hire, and you come through the hotel room door and you see some troll looking creature. You don't know if it's male or female, but you got to make love to that. you got to act like you're cool with that, whatever you run across. Same thing. The only instrumentalists that don't carry their little baby in with them, right? Except for timpani drummers and stuff, right?
Well, I have a cousin who plays bass, and if he goes traveling, he doesn't take his bass. It's hard to take a bass. You take a cello, you can buy a seat for it. A bass, there are.
It's big. It's anyway. Big cargo. Yeah,
it is. But I guess I was talking about the voicing thing and the deep, but that was.
Yeah, somebody reminded us in the chat too. He said, "What tool were you going to talk about before the interruption?" It was something about you're talking about deep needling and.
It's over the years. I'd see these pictures of and I'd see these insanely long needles, insane to me, because all of the needling I had done, they would break off the first time, So this is stupid. I thought, this is unrealistic. No, it isn't. It is what professional voicers have used all along. And the trick, if you like, is that you don't jab, you press. You
Right.
start with the tip of the needles at the surface of the hammer, and you push in. And ergonomically, this works a whole lot better if you're standing up and using your body weight, as opposed to trying to use these crazy forearm muscles with your stack sitting on your knees. As I'm not to say that you need to be able to do stack on your knees kind of needling as well, but if you're going to do a whole set, you're best off to be standing there over it. And until you have done that kind of needling on a set of hammers, you won't have developed its full tonal gradient potential. The whole trick, well, what we really want out of voicing is the ability to have a wide range, the widest possible range of color in the whole piano available on every single note, so that every single note with a very small difference of speed, pressure, depression can stand out above every other note. And also at the same time, you can put any note below any other note. That is to say, we're trying to have minute differences in our technique of speed, force, etc., and be able to bring out one note above another. How does that happen? It happens because they have different timbres, because it has more high end. It's the high end that stands out. It's also the reason why the very top of the piano has to be bright like glass. Why? It's not there to sound pretty. It's there to stand out over the other notes that you're playing.
Oh.
And you know, if you're trying to create a wash of color, and have a melody stick out over the top of it, the melody can be anywhere. It can be in the middle of the piano, it can be down below, it can be way up high. In any case, you have to be able to make any note that you want to stand out above all of this other stuff you're doing. It needs to be able to sing. It sings by ringing, and by having high partials is what it boils down to. Now, if you do this kind of deep shoulder needling where you're opening up the sides and then kind of coming off at the very top of the crown so that you maintain this kind of a diamond shape and a diamond hardness, that will give you that possibility. That's the model. Forget about all of the tricks. Not to say that you don't use them once in a while, but there really isn't any mystery. This is what works. And in fact, my experience, it works on lacquered Steinway hammers. That's what I do when I am, you know, you have to have enough lacquer to because you didn't have enough density of felt over the crown to start with. So you have to lacquer to get that. And then you do this same, as long as you haven't saturated it so much you can't get the needles in. I mean, don't do that. Or if you've done it, wash it out. But that's what gives you this ability to have a tonal gradient.
I got a couple of questions coming in the chat. I think people are curious about specificity on the kind of tools that you're using when you're voicing, asking if you're using a chopstick tool, maybe specifically for some of the things that you recommended, like the techniques. Is the deep needling? What kind of needle are you using? Single needle chopstick voicing tool? Any
Single
Thoughts on
needle, I only really use for touch up of the attack sound, of being able to, if I'm trying to play pianissimo and there's some note go bonk, da 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 bump, 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 that's where I use it. I mostly use a 3-needle tool. I mostly use, well, I use a tool that I got from Jürgen, Pianoforte Supply, his 3-needle tool with his number 7 needles. Number 7 from his supplier is virtually identical in diameter to number 6 John James, which is another supplier. Don't bother about the number, mic it and find out what works for you. I usually use that typically, and yeah, typically 11 millimeters, as Dave Anderson said, occasionally a little more. And of course, going up the scale, once you get into the top couple octaves, obviously less, you'd be going through the wood. And as long as you're talking about what you use to needle, I also, for purposes of needling of creating una corda sound, una corda difference, I use smaller needles than I use quilting needles. They come up to about a number 12. So I generally use 10 to 12. You can find quilting needles online, and only sticking out about 3 millimeters max. And I use them in a 5-needle tool that I get from Jürgen. So we're talking about needling between the grooves here for una corda. And it's a matter of doing a good vertical deep needle, and maybe at both 1 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and 12 o'clock at the point where it stops, to have the maximum amount of change there. And then kind of in between the string groove and that point, I'll go at an angle, maybe just once. I mean, you have to experiment and find out what's going to work. So what you have now is the densest felt, the maximum attack noise, where the groove is, and there's a half position that is an angle, and then there's a full position that has more more strokes, so it's been softened up more and deeper. And you can do this kind of to a whole instrument in a half an hour. Then you can also use this same kind of technique. And at this point, I'm going down to the 12 needle, number 12 needle. And by the way, we're not going like this with those needles. They'll break off. You have to go straight in and straight back out. For touch up, it's starting to get a little brittle sounding. You can use this kind of needle right in the groove, either straight in or at 2 angles or in 3, whatever you decide how much of a difference you're wanting to make. And once again, 20 minutes, and I can take something that is, just too edgy down to something that I haven't killed, but I've made it a little more mellow. It's something you almost don't hear until you play it, and then you say, oh, yeah. And it's hard as just a piano technician instead of as a pianist to notice that difference, because it's very, it's subtle, but it makes all the difference in the world to trying to make the music sound.
No question.
I'm gonna cut in here real quick and just mention for the people that are watching on YouTube, Facebook, we usually just cut off there about halfway, quarter of the way through. So we'll cut off there. If you do want to continue with this conversation, we've put a link in the chat so that you can join us in the Zoom. Go ahead and do that. If you got some more to say about voicing, I think that would be interesting to hear. I also was curious if you wanted to chat a little bit about what you think you're going to talk about in the class that you're going to do at the upcoming convention.
Sure. You know, there we're talking about something very foundational, keys, and mostly key bushings, also balance holes, just dealing with keys in such a